You are listening to the Learnings and Missteps podcast, where we intend to change the image of careers in the trades. Each of the inspirational stories is designed to celebrate the real men and women who have built careers in the construction industry and how they impact the world around them. These stories are brought to you by three brothers who share a mother. I am Jesse, your host. Our in-house writer is Ernest, aka La Voz.
Hello.
And our co-host is Rene.
What's up?
Y'all ready?
Yes, sir.
Dale.
Hey, Jesse, what's in store with this new episode?
Well, on this new episode, we get a cameo from the Raptors. Rene's little babies make a showing in the background, which is kind of fun. But we also get to hear Ian Smith advise Rene, and Rene kind of gets some insight and a deeper understanding of like, that guy really cares about the people he's responsible to. And then Ian really shows some deep sensitivity and deep care for people. It's very easy for folks to assume that safety people don't really care. After you listen to this episode, there will be no doubt in your mind that Ian cares. You ready to check it out?
Let's do this.
We got Mr. Ian Smith here, and of course our co-host Rene is present, and me, I'll try to do as little talking as possible. But Ian, again, thanks for making the time on a Saturday morning to record this. And so what do you want our listeners or people out there to know about you?
You know, I know we're talking about our journey, and I want to share a little bit about as far back as I can remember, Jesse, of where I wanted to be in my life. And I'll tell you, I don't know that I really had a plan. I think back to when I was a kid. You know, I grew up in Connecticut, in central Connecticut. Both of my parents had jobs. My father worked two jobs for a good amount of time, one at the Postal Service and then a night job. And my mom worked for 30 years at the library in our hometown. And I have two brothers, one older and one younger than me. And early on, what I saw, right, and it's so ingrained in my mind, was how hard my father and my mother worked to provide for us, right? And I think back, and it wasn't necessarily about advancing at that time. It was more about surviving and being able to provide for us as young kids. And you can imagine three boys, the amount of food and things they had to do to provide for us and clothes, right? I remember, wearing hand-me-downs and drinking 3 gallons of milk every 2 days, right? I mean, we were a handful, I'm sure, to support. And I'll tell you, my parents worked really hard and to provide for us during those times. And, when I went to school, I've always been a good student. I've always been, actually thinking back, really sensitive and really in touch with my feelings. And I think I get that from both of my parents. And as I progressed, I was always average. I did well in sports at a younger age. I did pretty well in baseball. I played baseball from an early age. I played Pop Warner football from an early age, and we were always active, which was kept our minds and bodies, I think, in check. Right, my parents wanted us to have our energy be displayed somewhere other than at the house, right? Because you can imagine we're a pretty rambunctious bunch of kids. And what I remember is, when I hit around high school, early on, I started thinking, because my older brother had just graduated and he started going to community college, Middlesex, community college in Middletown, Connecticut. And he was kind of on a precarious path, right? I've always looked up to my older brother. His name's Jamie. And, he really was trying to find his own path. And I'm the middle child, right? So I'm watching my brother trying to navigate life. And, I don't think it was as easy as on him, right? Being the first out of the gate. And, he really trailblazed a lot of things for both myself and my younger brother. And him and I had always worked from early age, right? And again, I go back to that work ethic I saw my parents have. We both had paper routes as young kids. I worked early on at a greenhouse with my brother that does wholesale, actually had a retail shop up front. And we worked our tails off, right? Every chance we got, I made $4.27 an hour. I didn't ask for a raise ever. And by the time I realized it, my boss had asked, he looked at my paychecks and said, "We didn't ever give you a raise? Only $4.27 an hour?" I said, "Yeah, I thought that was what you wanted to pay me," right? And he gave me like a $2 an hour raise after that, right?
Ooh,
So
nice.
But that's the kind of grind my mindset was, right? I saw my parents grind it out and work and never complain. They just did it. And I never thought to ask for anything, right? I just knew I had a job. I was thankful to have a job as a young kid in middle school and high school. And I was happy to earn some of my own money, right? Because we didn't have any extra money for stuff, right? And I didn't have the Z Cavarici and the
Cavarici, baby, yeah.
I didn't have I had Stan Smiths. That was probably the nicest thing that I owned, right? It was the white with the green backs, right? I mean, I didn't have the greatest stuff. So, I had to earn my own money, right? And I think, early on, my brother and I, we learned that we needed to work hard, right? And we just did it and never really complained, never just put our heads down. And honestly, I enjoyed that hard labor. I think back to some of those times. It was probably one of the most enjoyable times of my life. Rene, I don't know if you've ever experienced this, but in my job, and I'm sure Jesse can tell you, my job now is a lot of talking. When I went to the greenhouse, nobody talked to me. I was able to listen to the music all day. And the plants didn't yell at me. The plants didn't feedback, right? Other than if they were dying, right? That was their feedback they were giving me.
They didn't cuss you out and roll their eyes at you?
They didn't give me
throw their hat on the floor.
Yeah, they did none of that, Rene, right? And I'll tell you, there was nothing more than a high when you walked into a greenhouse and you had that oxygen lift. I mean, it just hits you in the face, and like all of a sudden you get this like super energy, right? I mean, that carry forward. I told you my brother went to Middlesex Community College. He ended up dropping out of community college to work, which, was his path, right? College is not for everybody. Early on, I think talking to him now, he relishes that and wish he could go back and if he had a chance, go back to a trade school, right? And earn some type of skill, right? And grow himself in that matter. I ended up going and in high school, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. My senior year, we couldn't afford for there's a lot of schools in the Northeast. And I got into a pretty good school in Worcester, Mass. I had applied to a college called Assumption College. We just couldn't flat out afford it. We couldn't make it work. It was like $20,000 a year. It just was it wasn't going to work for us, right? And I ended up going to Eastern Connecticut, which was 45 minutes away from where I live. And I'll tell you, it was probably the best decision that I ever made in my life. Being close enough to home to go home, right? And be grounded with my family, but be far enough away to be able to try life out, right, on my own for the first time. And I'm very thankful for that opportunity because it enabled me to grow as an individual. Because up until that point, you didn't leave my hometown, guys, right? You didn't leave Cromwell, Connecticut. That was not a place that you left, right? You were centered around there. Other than family vacations, there was no getting out of it, right? So this was like my first real adventure as an adult. I was very thankful for that. And by the time I got into college, I already knew that I wanted to go into environmental. So I ended up in a biology and chemistry degree track. And Jesse, you might appreciate about me because I know you know me a lot more if you've listened to me or if interacted with me in the past. my mind churns a lot, right? And I'm putting things together in logical steps, right? And I'm thinking about every single thing that I'm doing and or the things that are going around me. And I'm trying to put it all together logically in a process, in a procedure, in a whatever it is. So science fit me really well, right? And I'll tell you, in school, I really excelled, right, in the science in the science field, and I was able to really dive in a little bit deeper. And I really enjoyed going to Eastern because they had passed your first 2 years, right, which is pretty much your weeding out classes, right? If you didn't pass organic chem or you didn't pass organismal biology, you had to change your major, right? You go into sports, whatever, right? Or whatever.
Sports, whatever.
Sports science.
Or sports science or communication, right? Communications.
Yeah.
Whatever that meant. Like,
those are the classes I would have had to take.
Yeah.
Same.
And as I progress, so like junior, senior year, I'm taking like physics with calculus without ever taking calculus before. I ended up doing field studies and we had I really enjoyed the work, right? Getting out into the field, going to collect data, scientifically plotting it out, trying to do experiments, Jesse. One time we were trying to understand how much a mouse expended their energy, depending on what you fed them and how much energy, caloric value the food had, and then what the actual caloric value was and what the excrement was of the mouse, right? You try to figure out how much that mouse expended. And everything that goes into the scientific method, right? Trying to figure it out. So a lot of experiments, right? Trying to figure that stuff out. And I also was able to take a class and do an independent study on cutting out a portion of a gene of a circular plasmid of the tobacco leaf. I was trying to make a broadleaf into a clubfoot and taking a DNA out and then inserting your own DNA into it, right? So it would
did you say take a DNA out? Did you say you're taking a DNA? How do you do that?
So you got to use enzymes, right? And then what you do is there's enzymes that attack a certain part of the chain of the DNA, and then you're able to extract it. You got to spin it down, and then you've got to insert your own link of DNA, right? And your hope is that you've modified that plant, right, or whatever the DNA of the organism is, right? So, this is. Well,
I know, right?
That's pretty fancy, man.
Well, it was fascinating to me because, like I told you earlier, I started leaning towards this botany side of things, right? Because I told you earlier, I worked in greenhouses all my life. So it's interesting how as I progressed in college, I went towards the plants, right? I went towards that side of things because I'll tell you, that was something I really, really enjoyed. Those types of experiences really, really shaped how I think and how I feel and what I learned, right? And probably it really affected who I am today in my path now. But I'll tell you, my career took a precarious turn, which is pretty interesting because before I left school, I did a co-op with a company called Pratt Whitney. They make aircraft engines for cross commercial and military. And I was in the environmental department there, and I learned a ton from them. It was a great experience, but there wasn't opportunities there for me, and I was looking for work. That co-op was ending. I was graduating. Being in Connecticut, it's not like jobs are aplenty at the time. And somebody said, "Hey, I know this company I used to work for named Chinbro, and Chinbro is a road and bridge contractor, do a lot of civil work." Mainly, they're actually based out of Pittsfield, Maine, and they had two other offices at the time, one in Bloomfield, Connecticut, which was not far from where I grew up. At the time, it was a great option for me because the honest truth is, when I tried to go get that botany job, Rene, my first job offer was $28,000 to be the head grower at a wholesale flower grower, right? And I don't know about you, I could live off of $28,000.
No. And that's
Right.
with a degree? You had like a degree in
Yeah.
that already?
That was in the,
Wow.
That's like 13.45 an hour.
Yeah.
well, what
Dang.
I foresee Ian Smith living in his parents' basements for the next 10 years, right? That's what I saw.
Ah,
Taking
with the
that.
plants. But you could have had plants in the basement with you.
Yeah, yeah.
That's true. Now I'll give you that, Jesse. I could have to keep me company. That's for sure.
Yep.
But
Yep.
but I'll tell you, I think what I realized, my father always wanted me to do better than he did. Right.
Yes.
So I didn't want to settle. He worked his tail off for me to go get a 4-year degree. My mother worked her tail off
Mhm.
and wanted me to do something better than
Mhm.
they could have ever have achieved. That in the back of my mind wanted me to continue and grow and do something bigger, right, than anybody
Sure.
else in my family had done to that point. So I did take that job with Chinbro. I did gotten a pay increase, which was great, and I was happy with what I was making. But even back then, I think it was like 38,000. So it wasn't like I was rolling in the dough, right? But
Sure.
I remember buying my first Nissan Maxima used, right? It was like
Yeah.
the biggest windfall. I thought I was a player back then, Jesse. You should
Yeah. Renee had one of
Cadillac
those.
with the
Yeah.
antenna came up automatically when you turned the radio on. I mean, I thought I was
Baller.
man. Yeah, I was a baller back then. That was
Did you
impressive.
put any neon lights on the bottom?
Oh no, I couldn't afford that, Jesse. That was
Oh, okay.
no, I put the radio in right with the removable face. Nobody
Yeah.
else
Yeah.
did it,
Pioneer.
right? Oh yeah.
Yep.
Right? I thought that was hot back then, right? That was cool. But I'll tell you, my first job out of the gate, you got to realize I didn't, and this was it was a safety role. I had no idea about safety, guys. Zero clue. Zero clue.
So you went from splitting DNA
Yeah.
to a safety role, and you had immense knowledge on the scientific method and
Right.
doing stuff with the botany, and then boom, hard shift to safety with no background. It's a job.
Never worked construction a day in my life. Never,
Wow.
Wow.
never done any of it at all. Right. I remember walking into the role thinking, I could do this, no problem, right? I'll attack this. I was cocky. Right? I'm not gonna lie. 22-year-old Ian Smith, boy, he was a trip. He was an interesting character. And but I could figure it out. And I remember the first job they put me on was a road and bridge job. We were redoing the granite along. There's a bridge between Agawam and Springfield, Massachusetts, and we were doing it at nights. It was 6 to 6, 4 days a week at night, right? Through the winter.
Yep.
We had to do lead abatement. We had to install new granite sidewalks. I mean, a curb. It was pretty tough, right? It was over the river.
What was the winter like? Because we're in Texas now, and winter, like, we have a different definition of winter. What was that like?
My first couple winters here, Jesse, in Texas, and I moved here in 04. I remember when we first moved into our home in 05, it snowed out. And this is probably a good example of the winters here in Texas. I got my winter clothes on. Of course, at the time, I still had like 20 jackets I bought from Connecticut, right? Like heavy duty. I had overalls and you name it, right? I had all that stuff still. I got out. I had my usual shovel because I couldn't find a snow shovel at Lowe's or Home Depot, right? They don't sell them here, right?
Yep.
Fine. And I'm out there shoveling my driveway and my front stoop because there was an inch of snow out there. And I'm looking around and everywhere, and there's nobody else shoveling their driveway or their sidewalk. And I'm thinking to myself, in Connecticut, you get fined for not doing, right? Because the mailman is going to slip and fall. So I get in and I tell my wife, I said, nobody's out there, shoveling out. And she goes, look, by this afternoon, the snow's going to melt. So nobody goes out and shovels their driveway or their sidewalk, right? And sure enough, the afternoon comes along, sun comes up, everything melts, right? So if winter's in Texas, if that describes anything, that's how it is here. But growing up, I remember working for a landscaping company during the snowfall, right? You were on call I mean, I remember that's how I made money, right? I mean, I went out and shoveled 3 foot of snow or 2 foot of snow. So winters at that time were pretty cold, right? And then at one point, I had to man the boat, the rescue boat down below in the water, right? And be out in the river and in the middle of winter. And it was not fun, right? I mean, you wore, I don't know how many layers I wore at that point, like 3 or 4, right? Just to stay warm. And you had a big mug of coffee, right? So you're ready to go. You know, I'm thankful for the winters in Texas because I'll tell you, it's one of the reasons I moved here other than my wife. But I think back to that job, Jesse, it was it was like a crash course, man. I remember, and you probably can hear me now, right? I'm very vocal. I talk a lot in my role. I was painfully shy, Rene. I remember the first couple weeks at that job, I practiced for at least a half hour to call and order safety glasses.
Wow.
I said, okay, I'm going to write the model down. I wrote out what I was going to tell the guy. I didn't want to sound stupid, right? Because I didn't know the vernacular, right? And if anything you know about construction, we have 4 or 5 names for everything. And they all make pretty logical sense. When somebody tells you what something is, it's exactly what it does typically, right? And that's right. There's probably an official name for it, but that's not what people call it, right? They call it whatever they think it is.
Right.
So it took a long learning curve, just like the first 6 months, just to figure that out, right? Or what things were called, what it is. But here I'm a 22-year-old kid trying to keep, a crew of 25 people safe. And I'll tell you, I think back to that, we got plain lucky because I didn't know what I was doing, guys. I really didn't. I really didn't know. And I feel poorly for those people, right? I think back. Sure. I mean, I was probably the worst safety manager they ever met in their life, right? Other than being one of the guys, right? I mean, I didn't know how to manage people. I didn't know how to communicate. I didn't have any tools in my toolbox. I could speak to plants. Couldn't speak to people, obviously.
Yeah. Rene and I, the last episode that we just posted, we talked a little bit about the really uncomfortable sense or sensation of growing into a leadership role. Right? You're talking about that's fundamental, right? The communication skills.
100%.
And like, I don't know what the hell I'm doing, but I'm just gonna try. It's a real thing. Rene's commented, like, one of the things that he likes about doing this podcast is that it's helping him build his communication skills.
Oh, yeah.
Right. I wonder how many people struggle with that. Earlier, Ian, you said you didn't have a plan, but as you're talking, and I've worked with you, right? So it's clear to me that you got a plan, and it's a long-term vision plan all the time.
Yeah.
But what you're saying now is like, yeah, you had a plan. Like, you would even plan out your conversation.
Oh, absolutely.
To order safety glasses.
Yes.
Right? Like, and for our listeners, that might sound goofy or over the top, but I do the same thing now. Like, when I'm going to do a presentation or had a meeting earlier this week with, with the high-powered audience, and you better believe I was outlining what message I wanted to say beforehand, so I could communicate my message, right?
Right.
You can't order safety glasses. Hey, bro, I need 10 of those safety glasses. The ones that are kind of smoky but not totally shaded.
Look,
right? And
yeah. Well, you should have heard my wording back then, Jesse. But I can appreciate what you're saying, because if I reflect back to that time, it was more at that time, the planning that I was doing was just to survive, if that makes any sense, right? I was trying to fake it to make it at that point, right? And the only way I knew how to do that is to rely on what I knew in the past, right?
Yes.
And at the time, I might not have had the long-term strategy, right, or the planning and thinking strategically for the future, but I was trying to survive in the moment, right? That was that type of planning, and that has shifted over times, and I could see that progression in myself, right? So, what's interesting is past that job, I went up to Syracuse, New York, to do another bridge because we wrote a bridge contractor. Oh, it was the Route 51 bridge over the Seneca River. I have really fond memories of that job because I had some great mentors and I had some people that really took the time, Rene and Jesse, to spend time with me, talk to me, and it's something I didn't have on my previous job. And it was really great, right, to be able to have that mentorship at that time. I had a guy named Chris Ballard who I actually still reach out to and keep in contact with, and he was a great guide for me and other statesmen to really help me through things, even though he was remote. He was somebody I could rely on. And I'll tell you, Chinbro, hands down, they were involved in behavioral safety back in early 2000, guys. They were way ahead of the curve of any other contractor I have even met to this day, right? If I think about them then compared to even people now, they were really progressive. So I learned from the best right at the time, right? It was nice. I didn't realize it at the time, but I had some great people that they surrounded me with, right? And I think back to that, I was very fortunate. And that's up to that point, guys. Things happen to me, and good things happen to me for whatever reason, right? I could never really explain it up until that point, guys. And even through my entire career, and I don't know if you can equate that to good things happen to good people, right? Or good things come to you if you work hard. But opportunities have always come to me based on my work ethic, right? And what I've done, right? So
I'd say more than good things happen to good people, my observation is good things happen when you work hard, right? Because you put in the work and laid the foundation in order to be prepared for the next opportunity. Being a good person in itself, I mean, that's a good thing.
No,
but if you ain't doing no work,
no, it's well said.
Nobody cares.
No, you're well said.
Yeah, I worked with a sheet metal mechanic once, and I was complaining to him about all the little inconveniences that I put myself in at the time. He told me, he's like, you know what, Rene, you make your own luck. Because I was trying to explain to him the bad luck that I have, right? And I was telling him about my little hoopty with the freaking, it was like a 1994 Honda Civic.
Oh man!
And the door wouldn't open anymore. And then like I found I had an oil leak now. I was like, man, I have such bad luck. Yeah. But he was explaining to me, you did that. You put yourself in that. You decided to take a shortcut, buy a car off of Craigslist, not look at the Carfax.
Yeah.
So you did that to yourself. So you made your own luck. Yeah, I really needed that kick in the pants.
Yeah, that was good advice. That job up in Syracuse that I had, it actually, I did a lot of more stormwater, Jesse, on that job. So I went back to my mental roots a little bit, right? I learned my chops, and I was still a doer, guys, at that time, right? I was one of the guys still, and part of the group, and I was a doer. And it's interesting because there's still people. There's one gentleman that works for our company now, Jesse, that worked with me back then, but he was a carpenter. And he's in safety now, which is pretty interesting. So every time I talk to him, I think in the back of my mind, thinking he remembers me when I was a 23-year-old knucklehead, right?
Yes.
Right? Yes. And he sees what I am today, right? And I'm thinking, boy, what does he think, right?
Yeah.
And it's interesting that happened because this is a small industry, and you never know who you're going to run into or work with again, And I'll tell you, it all kind of happened, and I not to give you guys a love story, but I'm going to give you a love story. I ended up quitting that. I ended up quitting that job, guys, because I was just worn out, and I'm not a quitter, but I just couldn't drive from Connecticut to New York, right, on a weekly basis. It was, to me at the time, 45-minute radius from my hometown was far, right? Now you're talking 5 hours. 5 hours. Now you're talking. Now in Texas, 5 hours is like, I do that in a day. I drive to San Antonio, come back to Dallas. I'm good, right? But back then it was a big deal to me. So I ended up quitting that job, going home. I got set up on a blind date with my now wife, on Valentine's
Cool.
Day. She lived in Dallas, originally from Oklahoma, and she lived up in Tulsa. We hit it off on Valentine's Day. This again a blind date. She just so happened to come to Connecticut. We had both friends that were together at the time. After I met her, we obviously communicated. I came down to visit her in Dallas, which, I'll tell you, coming from Connecticut, flying to Dallas for a time, I thought I was going to see cowboy hats and horses on the streets and, howdy and y'all and you name it, right? I thought I was going to see like an episode of Dallas, and none of that happened, right? Everything was concrete. It was like a concrete jungle, anything but what I thought it was going to be. But I spent more time with her, and I ended up moving here within 4 months of meeting her. I kind of just overstayed my welcome long enough where she just gave up and said, okay. I don't see that you're not going to go back to Connecticut. So I guess you're just going to stay here. And if you're going to do that, you need to get a job, right? So
10-4,
knowing that I was going to move here, Turner was actually doing a job in my hometown, and I stopped and gave the guy my resume. And I said, hey, I'm moving to Texas. Could you give this, put this in? And honestly, I don't even know the name of the guy that I gave the resume to. I wish I could go back and thank him. But he sent my resume in, and I got a job interview, and I was hired in September of 2004 after having a job interview with our now SVP and at the time my immediate boss. And Turner hired me, right? And again, I don't think they knew what they were getting at the time, right? I was just a kid that used to work for Chinbro.
Yep.
That's how I got to Texas. And I'll tell you, even to this day, I think back, and they put me on a job. It was a stadium job in South Dallas. And again, as much as I learned at Chinbro coming to Texas, I don't think I was really prepared for the commercial avenue, right? Because commercial is so much different than road and bridge work. The management of so many different disciplines and trades, and going from working with your self-perform group pretty much at that one organization, and now coming and manage 30 different contractors and God knows how many people on site, right? It was crazy right at the time. It was unique.
Did you ever feel scared?
Oh, every day I was scared. I mean, I come to Texas. I don't speak Spanish, even though I took like 7 years of Spanish in school, right? I mean, I could basically take a verb and add almost on it, right? Or vosotros, right? I conjugate the verbs, right? That's what I could do. And it was frightening, right? I was scared every day I came to work. I didn't know who I needed to talk to, what to do. I think that we didn't have documented pre-test safety plans. Like, we didn't ask that from contractors. Like, it was more of a Rene, what are you doing today? Right? That was the conversations we were having, and people would just go to work. Right? There was no formal written plan or what you were going to do or how you were going to do it. It was just, hey, the schedule says X, and I need to go get that done. At the time, I just walked around and I feel like I was the Queen of England, right? Just
the Queen of England,
talking to people and faking my Spanish pretty well, right? And
smiling and waving.
Oh yeah, man. You got to realize this is before we were wearing safety vests, before we were wearing gloves, right? I mean, basically, you had a hard hat and safety glasses, and that's what you did,
But you're not scared anymore, right?
Oh, no, absolutely not, right? I mean, as I think from that guy, I still am the same fundamental person, right? I've always deeply cared about people. I've always connected deeply with people and feel emotion, right? And project how they feel onto me. But how I talk to people and how we interact with people, that communication, Rene, has been exponentially higher, right? So what you got to realize, and what I realized over time, and this really hit me when I did a job in 2007, and I was only like 27 at the time, and they put me on a job with a very demanding client of safety. And what I realized is people don't know what you're going to say, Rene. They have no idea, right, what you're going to say. So don't be fearful, right? They don't know if you forget something. They don't know if you had like a 15 bullet point thing that you wrote down on a sheet of paper. They don't know that you missed bullet point 6 and number 9, right? They don't care, right? And that's all on you, right? That's in your head. And what I realized is I generally know what I want to say, and I know how I want to come across. And honestly, I always realize this about myself now, is that I want to speak genuinely from the heart, because it comes across so much better, right? So even when I, depends, talking to different types of groups, I really have the same approach. When I talk to a worker, it's respectful. Somebody out in the field, it's respectful of their time, respectful of their craft and who they are. Trying to understand where they're coming from, right? You seek to first to understand before you're understood, and you want to understand people, right? And instead of projecting what you need or what your what your agenda is, you got to get to know people, and you disarm them in a lot of ways, right? Because they're so used to safety cops, they're so used to people barking at them, right? I mean, that's the last thing people want at work. I've always tried to employ that, but even in a bigger group, right? I've spoken in front of 1,500 people, Rene, right? And a lot of folks, and my wife would tell you this, she could never get up in front of a group of 10, right, to deliver a presentation. She probably planned for 4 weeks to try to deliver that presentation. I go up there without one note on my sheet, and I'll stand in front of 1,500 people and talk and not miss a beat.
Nice.
And it's, I'm not trying to brag here, but this is what I do. I don't look at anyone. I look at the group, and I almost pretend that they're not looking at me, right? And I just vocalize my words, and my vision kind of goes a little bit blurry, right? Because I kind of put everything out of focus, and I just speak from my heart. And I try to make, again, like Jesse knows this about me, logical sense, right? I always try to put things into logical order for people, so people can put things together easier for themselves when I speak. When you try to do that, you kind of fool yourself into being able to not be afraid, not to be scared. And if you're always speaking from the heart, then how can you go wrong, right? How can you go wrong?
That's good. There's a lot of wisdom there, Ian. Like, speak from the heart. One of the reasons that I really wanted to get you on the podcast is because I recognize, you said it earlier, you're a sensitive man, and you have a level of empathy that very few human beings have. Like, you can connect with people, you can sense where they're coming from, you can sense how to deliver your message, right, to achieve what it is you're working towards. And I've always displayed immense respect for the people around you. And more than that, you expect the people around you to exhibit the same behavior. We had the one of the GBI events at a project in San Antonio, and you noticed a flaw in what we were doing. And the flaw was that we weren't engaging directly, showing the appropriate respect for the worker. And you called it out and said, wait a minute, what are y'all doing? We need to, bring them over here. They're not lab rats. Let's talk to them and help them understand what's going on.
Yeah, they're not a bunch of plants, Jesse, right?
Yeah, they're not a bunch of shrubs. Exactly.
That's right.
And you're in the safety run, you have immense responsibility as the director of EH&S, right, for the region. And too many times that safety professional have a bad rap, right? And many of them have earned it because they are the safety cop, right? They are the barkers and yellers and, box checkers, but you're not, right? In my mind, the way you carry yourself is exactly what safety professionals, and more than safety professionals in general, it's exactly how they should carry themselves. So you're the fantastic example of what we're looking for in leadership, in leaders.
Well, I'll give you the why. I have a why behind that.
Oh, right.
This is why I am like I am. I'll sum it up in this story, and it's very personal for me. So excuse me if I get choked up a little bit, because I do tell this story I actually do a training we call Lead the Way, Rene,
Mm-hmm.
that we're actually training the fundamentals of leadership for crew leaders.
Oh, cool.
And we're trying to give people the tools to become better leaders for the people that they serve. And I'm very fortunate to be able to teach that class. I'll tell you, there's a section in the class that we've developed that is about communication, and it's about motivation and inspiration of their people, right? So here's what I would tell you. I spoke about my father earlier, right? And a lot of things for me come back to family and the things that I value, right, with my family. My father passed away in 2016, very suddenly, overnight, and it had a great impact on me and my family, right? I've everything I've done. I heard you. I really want to make my father proud, right? I told you.
Yep.
I wanted to be better, right? And wanted to make my dad proud of where I was going, and to show him my hard work his hard work was going to pay off, right? Because I was going to be there for him, my family, my parents, and everybody. My father, we had his wake, and my dad was a postal worker. He had the same route forever, okay? And if you realize anything about a postal worker, and maybe not so much in Texas because a lot of it's drive-by, my dad walked his route every single day, right? So if you think about it, your postal carrier is the person that's there for you in your time of need. They see you every day. My dad made people laugh. He made people cry. He was there when they needed him. He was there delivering happy news, sad news, right? He was always there on that route, right? And making people's day, right? He had a way about him. If you had ever met him, right? He was my hero, right? My dad smiled all the time, would make you laugh. He was goofy. He was just a wonderful guy, right? And when he passed away, we had his wake. And I'm sorry thinking about it.
No, you're good, man.
I tell you, there probably was 250 people lying around the block, and it was raining out, right? And a lot of his customers showed up, and the things that they would say about him made me realize the impact of how many of the lives that he touched. What a wonderful person he was. The happiness he brought, the things that he did for people. He was so unselfish. He was good to so many people. And I'm so sorry I'm getting choked up about it.
It's beautiful, man. Thank you.
I want to treat people the way my dad did. But, my dad, he created a legacy that's going to be hard to live up to, right? He made such a great impact on me and so many people that I just want to be a leader that make people better, right? To improve for themselves, to have the best lives that they can. And I want to inspire people to want to be better, right? No matter what it is in this life, whether it's at work or personally, I just want people to be better, right? And be happy. And that's where everything it comes out of me comes from, right? Is genuine care for people, because I want to live out my father's legacy.
That's amazing. Thank you, Ian. I'll say this from my perspective, from me to you, you have had that impact on me. I want you to take that for real. I'm not going to have to say it after you're gone. I'm telling you right now, you have had that impact on me.
I appreciate that. See, those are kind words.
And I applaud you for that.
Well, I'll tell you, when I think about my leadership in this company or leadership overall in the industry, I want us to succeed in safety, because there's far too many people that die in this industry, right? There's far too many people that get hurt and affect their families, and the impact that those things have had on my life, right? You never want to have to tell a family that you're not coming home. And for the people that you said earlier that are safety cops and that are checking a box, right? Those people don't belong in this profession, okay? They don't. The only way we're going to make a difference is if we can reach the hearts and minds of every single worker and every single person that works in this industry to make them better. It's going to take winning hearts and minds over one at a time, and that's what I'm going to do. And that's what it's going to take collectively. We need to all be thinking that way, and that's what my mission is, right? Is to do that. It's not easy, but if I live my life every day, Jesse and Rene, the way that I feel I need to live my life, then I'm going to do that. And I think that's what drives me in everything that I do. And I'll tell you, we've grown so much. And I went from a group of, small, like maybe 15 H&S professionals in the region that I cover. We now have close to 60. And I'll tell you, trying to find people that fit the model of what you're all about and what you want to achieve, it's not an easy thing, right? And to inspire those and develop a followership, Rene, right? So they hopefully can learn from those things that I perpetuate, right? And I speak about. I want them to shorten their learning curve, right? I want them to learn quicker than I ever did, right? And get to a spot where they can take all the lessons learned that I had in my career and chuck that and learn from me and not even have to go through all those things. And that's my hope for the folks that I touch and I work with.
That's so cool because like I just had a conversation the other day about some superintendent recently got promoted to superintendent. He
Sure.
was a foreman or whatever, and now he's here. And the person I was talking to felt that he got promoted too quickly and that he doesn't know what he's doing, right? And maybe he may or may not deserve the job even, right? That was what the conversation was like. And I don't know these people, but I think that's so cool because like he was saying that, well, I asked him, I was like, well, how do you know he doesn't know what he's doing? He's like, well, I went to a job site with him and he didn't know the name of this and he didn't know how to do this repair or whatever. And it was just so discouraging. I was like, man, well, I mean, he probably in my head, I'm like, well, now he knows, right?
Yeah.
And then he puts that in his back pocket and now he's ready for the next time. In my opinion, I think we don't need to know everything right now, but I don't hear a lot of stories about that. I always hear stories about the guy that was a hot shot from day one, hit the ground running, and then he grew in his career because of he always just knew. That's the story I hear. But your story, it's quite like to hear that you were scared to like even order those safety glasses, and now look at you and like you actually care about people and stuff. That's so cool. I don't hear that a lot, and so I thank you for sharing.
You're giving me way too much credit. I'm still average when it comes to safety. Right? I'm going to make your point for you, right? And I'll tell you, I don't need to know everything. That's not what Ian's about. I'm not the most savvy technical guy that can quote you the book, Rene. Right? I don't know those things, and I'm never going to be that detailed of a guy. Right? I'll never get that. But what you try to do is you grow a group, a team that works together, right? And collectively, you have that knowledge. I don't need to be the best at everything. What I need to do is I need to motivate, inspire people at my level as a leader to improve, right? And I'm more of the guidance person, right? I inspire people, I motivate them, I plan strategically the big picture stuff, but you got to allow people to execute those things, right? And they'll know, they'll bring in their expertise, right? You don't have to know all that stuff, right? And I'll never claim. I learn every single day on this job. Every single day I'm learning something, and you got to be humble when it comes to that, right? And I think that superintendent you gave an example of, I think that individual's gonna do a great because they're learning every single day, right? And for people that look so short-sighted to that, right? It's not as much to me the technical skill as how you can gather people together, lead them. And unfortunately, what we see in this industry, and we see, especially at the front line, is we take the producer on a crew and we make them the leader. It doesn't make them a good leader, the biggest producer, right? What makes them a good leader is how they treat their people, how they can set direction with their people, how they mentor their people, how they develop them, how they communicate with them and show genuine care for them. Those are the things that make them a good leader. It's not because they produce the most. And I think that's the mind shift that people need to have. So that person they think might be promoted too early, he probably has all those soft skills, Rene, over a lot of other people, right? And if you can have those, you're going to go a lot further in this industry than you are the first person that's just going to pump out the work.
Wow, that's awesome. I think, man, I really hope my coworkers hear this.
But it's a mind shift, right? Like Ian said, it's an absolute mind shift because, think of like the role that you're in, Rene, right? You're a producer. You go out there and you do things. And of course, your peers are in the same, that's the same expectation. Go do. And you get your performance, your raises, all of that revolves around your ability to produce and do things. And we'll say no things. And like Ian said, when you start elevating in the leadership role, you've got to have a learner's mindset because you're always going to be learning and you have to listen, which is a very undeveloped skill for a lot of us, especially me. But it's not because it's just, Ian said it best, right? There are the soft skills, which are like power skills that a leader must have. It's not about output anymore. It's about connection. It's about motivation. It's about learning. It's about setting direction. Yeah. And those skills are very different than executing tasks.
Well, I also think I have satisfaction in knowing that people around me are being successful in what they're doing, right? And their success is my success. I don't have to toot my horn. I don't have to scream from the mountaintops. I find satisfaction in knowing that the people around me are succeeding, right? And doing a wonderful job. And that gives me happiness right inside. That fulfills me. And I don't need to self-fulfill myself in other ways, right? And I'll tell you, that's what drives me to develop and mentor people. That makes me happy. And I'll tell you, that improvement piece really is something that bit me early a long time ago as a kid, right? Like I was saying earlier, my whole life. I remember back to those greenhouses, Jesse. I remember trying to improve how many plants I could carry to the next greenhouse, right? How could I hang it off my finger in a different way to put 3 pots in one hand and 4 in the other, time myself, right? I did time studies, all the improvement bug bit me a long time ago. And thinking back to all those things. And when I got introduced to lean, for example, early on around 2012, a light bulb went off for me when I learned more about it. And I learned more about the pillars of lean. It all comes together for me, right? And that's why, for me, I'm a great advocate, and probably have a lot of safety EH&S professionals tell me otherwise. Safety is a byproduct of being a lean enterprise, right? If you are a lean enterprise, then safety will come, quality will come. And I actually really do believe that, right? Because you got to be a learner. You have to learn, and you got to continuously look ahead, right? And when people put it all together and not silo things, they don't silo safety, they don't silo quality, they don't silo some of the lean concepts that we're doing, and they can put it together. It's all intertwined. That's the kind of messaging I'm really trying to, if you ask me what the future looks like and what I think it should look like, all of the things that we talk about with safety, Rene, should go away. We have this vernacular, right? And we seem to silo these things. Like I said, we do we call them safety plans in the morning, Rene. Why is it a safety plan? It's not a safety plan. It's a work plan. And you discuss production, you discuss safety, you discuss quality, You discuss how people are doing that day, right? It's a plan, and it's what you do every single day. That kind of terminology, I think, in the future, if people could put all those things together, my hope would be they don't silo the things, and they can put it together in their minds that they all play off of one another. That's my goal in the future of safety. I want to work myself out of a job.
Yep.
Cool.
Yep. So Ian, you are a very passionate man, obsessed. Maybe that's an exaggerated word, but obsessed with continuous improvement.
I am.
And deeply care about people.
That's right.
Have you ever been in a situation where people misunderstand that and respond mistakenly to your passion and energy?
Well, that's a really good question. About three or boy, maybe longer. I'm getting old. 4 years ago or so, David Solomon and I, a coworker, we developed or at least came up with what we were calling an observation circle, and it's actually a little bit of a process that's similar to the Gemba-based improvement, Jesse, that we did this past week.
Yes.
And really deeply going to understand the work, right, by getting to the Gemba. And that was really the basis of the observation circles, to observe work and provide feedback to people. I've done these observation circles, right, getting out to the field. We watch the work for 20 minutes. We'd bring leadership group back in, talk about improvements, and then we would bring the workers in and talk about those improvements. And I probably have done at least 50 of these the last couple of years. Right?
Yep.
And it's always interesting, depending on the trade partner, depending on who it is and where I've done them, because I've done them in Texas, Ohio, New York City, right, all over the place, right?
Yep.
And it's interesting to see how people take those improvements, because people get pretty defensive, can be pretty defensive on how I do things. This is what we do, Jesse. This is how This is how we do it. When I first I did 3 in New York City. I helped facilitate them. The perception coming into it for the trade partner was, this is just another thing they want us to do, right? Here's another thing, right, that we're going to ask somebody to do. Through the experience of it, there was a little push. There was a little aggravation on their part to go, boy, what, they're really making me go watch my work for 20 minutes? I mean, come on, right? I'm out here all day long. And by the end of it, right, as we facilitate the session and we talk about improvement, people start seeing the light. But it takes the whole process, the people's eyes start opening up. But that fight in the beginning, Jesse, right, that, this is how we do it. That I've seen that more than once, right? And what I've learned is you can't force your ideas on people, right? They have to come do it for themselves. They're not going to do anything that you want them to do unless they believe in it, right? I can walk away tomorrow, write you a list, Rene, of 15 things, but unless you value my opinion or you value the things that I say are improvements, then you're not going to do them. And that's what I found, right, is that I need to somehow convince you a value proposition that this is good for you. And if I can't do that, then I've failed, right? Or we haven't communicated in a proper way to you of the why that they're good for you. Jesse, the honest truth is I probably go up against this every day. In different ways, right, in my job. So I hope that answered your question.
It does. I mean, I think in the type of work that you do, the type of work that I do, we represent change to people. And it's very easy to take their response or reaction to the change, to take that personal, as if they're rejecting us. Yeah. But they're not rejecting us. No. They're rejecting the change.
That's right.
Right? When it comes to change, I've got a bunch of X's that will tell you that I didn't want to change, right? We don't like to change as human beings.
That's right.
And when your responsibility and influence grows within an organization, it's important to know that people are responding to change. They're not rejecting you, they're rejecting the change. And that you pointed out so astutely, it may be because of the way we're delivering the message.
Oh, absolutely.
Let's pump the brakes when you start getting your feelings hurt. Pump the brakes, take a deep breath, and change the message so that you can connect with them. Because your passion and energy, they may be misinterpreting it as a dictation or a judgment, a conviction. And
Right.
really, the conviction is from within you to help them. You want to take the suckiness out of their work, the risk out of their work, and learning how to craft that message like in the moment, man, that's a magical power that I know you have because I've seen it live.
I try to influence people's minds and hearts, right? That's usually my way in being genuine, right? And try to get people to see the why. At the end of the day, I really truly believe people want to come to work and do a good job, guys. They want to earn for their families. They want to provide for their families. They want to be happy. Nobody's coming to work and saying, boy, I'm just going to do a crappy job today. Nobody does that, right? I mean, who wants to have a crappy day, Rene? Nobody does, right? They want to be happy.
No.
And I believe in the good in people, right? So,
Mm.
if you can improve how hard something is, I think they're going to want to listen, right? Or if you can improve something that they have an opinion about, that they can provide you feedback on, that you can act on, then you need to go do that for them. And how even though, no matter how small it is, if you told me, Rene, that it would make a difference to put a smile on the sun, right? Or whatever it is. I tried my damnedest to go do that, right? Or, if you just want me to paint a line on the ground because you thought it was going to be better, right? For whatever. I do that for you. People want to be listened to. They want to feel like they're doing a good job and people value what they say, right? And if you can just act upon that, I think what ends up happening is if we get so wound up in our daily grind of what we're supposed to be doing that we forget to stop and listen. We forget to talk to people. We need to focus on people. And I'll tell you, that's been a message to our organization is you got to stop and get to the Gemba. You got to talk to people at the front line that are doing the work and find out what's making their job so hard and try to take away those things. And that's really going to make a huge impact on this industry.
Absolutely. And we, like you said earlier, right? We hurt, maim, and kill too many people in the industry. But we got to get out there to see what the hell's going on and listen to them because they're the ones that know what sucks. And it's our job as leaders to take that out, design it out of the work. Question, Ian, you are an influential person. Rene, are the kids, they having a choir practice out there?
Yeah, my daughter's practicing.
Making a TikTok.
Yeah.
Jesse, come on, get with the times.
Oh man, I got to catch up so bad. Yeah. So, Ian, you're a very influential man. How do you intend to impact the universe before you leave?
Boy, that's a terrific question. One, I'm really worried about the world that my kids are growing up in. I have a 6-year-old. His name is Xander, and my daughter's 8, and her name is Elin. And my goal is to do what my dad did for me and provide them a value set that they can view the world with, that they can make a positive impact on this world. Because the honest truth is, Jesse, I'm not the future anymore of this world, right? I'm not the future of this company. It's the people coming in behind us that are truly going to make an impact on the way this world views itself, right? And its people. That's my goal as a father, right? To make a positive impact on their lives, and I want to do that for my kids, and I want to do that for the world, right? Because there's far too much tragedy and far too much things going on in this world, right? That I'm scared of, right? For my kids, and we need a brighter future. This pandemic, I think, has probably taught us a lot about ourselves as people and the things that we've been through this year in 2020. There's been a lot of challenge to a lot of emotions. So that's really for the worldview, what I want to do. But when it comes to, immediacy and I have an opportunity in my role to help shape thoughts and influence on some of our highest senior leadership, and at least in the region that I cover. And, I hope that I'm the voice of reason. I would hope that I'm the person that brings clarity and reason to a lot of the things that we do and how we shape our policies or some of the programs that we implement to really make a big impact on our job. And my goal is to press the envelope further, right? I mean, we've come so
Yes.
far in safety since when I first started to where we are today, to be able to reflect back and see where we are and to know that, we are on our way to go beyond zero, right? And beyond zero means, Rene, when somebody comes to work, you probably heard a lot of people say we want to send them home the same way they came to work, Rene. You've ever heard that?
Yeah, I've heard that exact phrase.
Well, you know what? That's not what I think. I think that we should send people home better than when they came to work, Rene. Right?
Awesome.
We need to send them home in a better mental state. We need to send them home happier than when they came to work. We need to send them home with more money in their pocket. We need to send them home safe to their families, right? And better than when they came. I have an opportunity to do that. So my goal is to continue to influence those things and to make a difference for the folks that are at the front lines, right? Because they're the ones that are really doing the work. I'm just a servant to them. I'm a person here to hopefully make a difference for them.
I have a question too.
Yeah.
So, on behalf of myself and the listeners, what would you tell someone who's getting ready to be promoted and they're feeling the pressure to know everything about that promotion and what that entails right now?
It's a great question. I've made some mistakes when I got promoted, and I want you to learn from what I did. One, I first came in, even though they might be nervous, I thought I knew everything, Rene. I was that guy at one time. What I failed to do is to stop and evaluate what was going on around me and listen and to really find out what the current state was before I try to do anything that I wanted to do, right? Or make any changes that I wanted to make. So first, need to stop and take a pause, and whether it's a week or 2 weeks or a month or whatever that time is to evaluate either your crew or the situation that you're dealing with, right? You need to give yourself some time to think. Far too often, people don't give themselves the gift of time, right? Because people want to see action. Mm-hmm. And you got to give yourself the gift of time to think about what the current state is, right? Before you go do those things. Once you do that, right, you need to sit down and think about a strategy that's either short-term or long-term, Rene, on what your short-term strategy is with what you're doing, and then what your long-term strategy is, and try to figure out how to bridge that gap and work yourself to that point, right? And thinking strategically is a lot harder than it sounds. Okay?
Yeah.
That it's easier to say. I could say those words, but to really put out a formal plan, right, is a lot more difficult, right? So how do I get from point A to point B? And then logically, again, this goes back to my scientific mind, right? Logically progress in steps. So it's not you're not going to do everything on day one, right? How do we progressively get there? You need to take the time to think. You got to use your resources, and the best resources you have are the people you surround yourself with, right? So as a person that's going into a crew leader role or getting promoted, you need to, again, use them and understand their capabilities, Rene, right? And what we do far too often, fit the worker to the work and not fit the work to the worker, right? So,
oh yeah.
What you got to do is understand your people enough and understand their strengths and weaknesses to develop a plan to have them excel in what they're doing. And I think, again, those are things that you got to contemplate as you do. And I think the last thing I would say on your question is that we think we do a good job at setting direction, Rene. We do a terrible job at setting direction. Okay? Anybody can set direction, but it doesn't mean that they're good at it, right? And there's a couple of things that come into play when you set direction, right? You got to give people a why. Why am I doing what you're asking me to do, right? People want to know, how they fit into the bigger picture of things, Rene. And they want to know. You got to give them the when. This is where we've probably failed the most times, right? It was we don't tell people when they need to get things accomplished, right? And we fail them as a leader by not giving them that when, because then we're either disappointed because they didn't get it done on time, or they're seen as a failure because they didn't get it done on time, right? You got to give them the how. And I'll tell you, as much as it is easy to say, oh, that person's a journeyman or they're a whatever, right? Sometimes people need to understand the how you want it to get done, right? Mm-hmm. And obviously the what, right? What needs to get done. But you gotta, everybody communicates differently, Rene, okay? Everybody has a different work style, and people process information differently, okay? There are those people like myself that put things together quickly, and that's a skill that I have, right? I've always had, and I put things into logical order. There are people that are very calculated, that are engineers, that need to like gather as much information as possible so they can fully take time to develop and understand. There are people that just take charge and plow ahead, and they don't want you to tell them anything, right? They want to just go, go, go. And there's people that are very empathetic, right? And you need to come to them with a soft approach and make sure that anything you tell them more is on a kind of a relationship level, right? And you're taking their feelings into account. So if you think about all those different types of people that make up our workforce, right? You can't just have one communication strategy, Rene. You got to have multiple communication strategies, right? To be able to communicate to your people. So there's a lot that goes into being a leader. It's not as easy as getting promoted. Like I said earlier, right? There's a lot of things that you got to put into play to be successful. Hopefully that answers your question.
Oh yeah, better than I thought. Thank you.
Okay, no problem.
Yeah, and like Ian said, you got to give yourself time to learn how to do all of that.
Yeah.
Right? There's no magic pill or magic button that you figured that out, right? You figured that over time.
Yeah.
Trial and error, lots of error. Take notes.
Lots of error. That's a good, Jesse. I can't tell you if you, and I'll tell you, Jesse will appreciate this. I have failed at so many things, guys. I'm not going to tell you right now. I have tried things. And what I've learned about myself is I generate a lot of ideas, guys. I have an idea guy, right? And I will try them and they'll fail miserably, because what I continually do, and I know this about myself right now, is I have great ideas, but they can't sustain themselves without getting other people to believe in it and to continue on what the idea is. So that's why I've failed in the past, right? Is the sustainability of some of the things that I'd like to do. So what I do now is I really try to focus on what can we achieve that's going to be sustainable and easy to do. If it's going to be hard to do, but it's a great idea, it doesn't matter, right? Because you're not going to be able to keep it up. What I try to focus on are the things that I can continue doing and to keep that going.
The wisdom of Ian Smith.
I try.
Yeah. Well, man, this has been awesome conversation. I get the sense, Ian, that we're probably going to do this again. But before we close, Rene, do you have any last thoughts or questions?
I know that was it.
I have something, if you don't mind. I think what I've learned, especially this year, with COVID-19, and I know that you might not have spoken this on your podcast, but I want to tell everybody, this is a dangerous virus, right? And there's a lot of people have died from COVID. A lot of people suffering, right? A lot of families suffering. And all I would do is implore everybody that listens to make good decisions for themselves and their families and their loved ones, for their coworkers, right? Regardless of your politics, your beliefs, or whatever it is, right? Please be good to others, respect others, and protect one another. And really, if you take that mindset, you'll do all you can to protect each other from getting COVID. And there's light at the end of the tunnel with vaccines coming, and that's exciting. and to hear that those things are coming. So we hope 2021 brings on a new reality for us. But
Yes.
guys, I don't see this. Some of the practices that we're doing now, I don't think are going to go away for a while. If you look at it, we're right in the middle of things now, right? And it probably won't be until the end, closer to the end of 21 or the third quarter for us to see some realization of COVID leaving our lives. And obviously, we always want that to happen sooner. Just take care of one another is really the message.
Well, I'll say in closing, Ian, at the very beginning, you said that you were always average. And I think our listeners, after hearing your story and the wisdom and insight that you've shared, are going to be confused. Because, my man, you are nowhere near average. You are an amazing human being, man. And it's a privilege to be your colleague, to be your friend, to have you as a mentor to learn from. You are not average, Ian. You're phenomenal. And also thank you for teaching my baby brother. Because I think you opened his eyes.
It's been a great pleasure, and I really appreciate you both for having me on. And I want to introduce you to somebody before we close. Come here.
Yeah. Let's see it.
This is my son, Xander. Xander's 6 years old. He's actually probably going to be taller than me probably in the next 3 years. He's already like 4'6" or so. I mean, he's
6 years old?
Yeah, he's a tall kid. I don't know where he got it from. Don't ask me.
We just wrapped up that episode with Ian Smith. And Rene, is there anybody you want to give a shout out to?
Yeah, let's give a big shout out to Titans of Trades, who says, everyday heroes in the trade industries make this world run. This podcast highlights the hearts of these everyday heroes changing the world for the better. These essential, everyday people that are often forgotten or looked over provide the basic good and services of everyday life. They have stories to tell and have diverse and unique backgrounds that builds and improves society's infrastructures. Highly enjoy the podcast, and you will too. Thank you, Titans of Trades. That just nails it right on the head, what we're trying to do here. Thank you for that.
Shout out. Thank you, Titans of Trades. Well, that's the end of this episode. Thank you for being gracious and sharing your time with us. We ask that you show us some love on social media. Give us some honest, actionable feedback. Help us understand if we're headed in the right direction and providing an entertaining and insightful experience for you. You can also give us that feedback directly via email at jesse@learningsandmissteps.com. So thanks again. Be cool, and we'll talk at you next time.